This is a fake room, and so is this one. I know, almost fooled you, right? And you know what the best part is? I'm not using a green screen. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can get almost any background you want without any fancy equipment or space. Anybody who's tried to achieve any sort of fake background has likely come to the realization that it's not as easy as it seems. If you don't have a large studio to set multiple lights to get perfect lighting conditions to be rid of any shadows, creases or reflections on the green screen, especially if you need shots from head to toe, you will most likely be frustrated and likely give up. And even if you do have the space, not everyone can afford the green screen or all the fancy equipment that goes along with it. In this video, I try and find ways around this problem and compare an affordable setup of a small green screen in a really tight space to an AI-generated fill background. This is to find out which one's more realistic, which one's less work, and the easiest way to go about it overall. If you've ever lived in the UK or have been on holiday, you've likely come to the realisation that you don't get a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to real estate. Things like gardens and houses are a lot smaller than people in other countries are used to, especially if you're just starting out and aren't even sure if your channel will take off or whether it's worth the investment. Some of you may be renting, studying, or sharing a room with roommates, parents, and even going outside to film is not always an option. As is common with smaller households, there's also a lack of storage, therefore clutter can accumulate fast. My bedroom is the biggest room of this house, and I still don't feel like I have enough room to put everything. Not only that, but my equipment is also cheap, and it's hard and awkward to fit myself into the little corner you see in my videos. In order to not spend the rest of my YouTube days like a twisted sardine in a can, I went out on a search for a solution for a different kind of background, and two of the most logical options would be green screen and AI. Normally, a green screen setup requires about 5-6 feet between you and the green screen to avoid light spill, and another 5-6 feet between you and the camera. You would need the key light and multiple fill lights to avoid any shadows in attempts to keep the tone as even as possible, as well as lights around you and sometimes above you. Obviously I have nowhere to put any of that, therefore I decided to try out a couple small green screens and my good old ring light. My first experience with green screens came when I bought a frame that you'd place behind you. Then you'd clip a green cloth like hanging up your clothes to dry. It was cumbersome to set up and I kept tripping over it. Then I figured maybe setting up lights and everything would be easier with a smaller setup. I bought one of those circular shaped green screens that attach to the back of your chair. The idea was that it would be sturdy and portable enough to get some even lighting going on it. And boy was I wrong, the thing felt bigger than the previous one I'd bought. I'd even send the light bulb knocking just for holding it upright. Getting the thing attached to my chair was a bit of a pain in the arse as it seemed to have a mind of its own, as it would sway backwards when I tried to get a hold of the two straps. In a nutshell, in order to replace your background with something else, first you'll need to import your footage into Adobe Premiere Pro, then you'll need to look for Ultra Key in the Effects panel, and then drag it onto your segment. In the Effects Control panel, look for the Ultra Key, expand that and look for the Colour Dropper tool. Click that and then you can click anywhere on your green screen. To play around with the shadows that might be left behind, you can play with these settings, what have I got noted down here. Under Matte Generation, and it'll have two called Pedestal and Shadow. Moving on from my own past experience with green screens, let me tell you about where I found solace, and that's in generative AI. I've tried numerous AIs with the generative fill option, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Dream Studio, Playground AI, Alpaca, but none come close to the quality of Adobe Firefly, which you can now use with Adobe Photoshop. Now I will be fully open to accepting proof that it can work with other products. However, from my experience, Adobe Firefly is the only AI which can match the webcam perspective you'll likely have when filming yourself. Not only that, but also seamlessly fuse your immediate surroundings within you a fake background. The only drawback to this is that you will face some limitations over what backgrounds you can have, depending on how much you move in the video. The reason for this is because when I move my hand in front of the TV in the next example, that TV becomes part of the next background. So without a bit of extra work on Photoshop to nudge the AI in the right direction and some clever prompting, you might struggle in your travels to Mars. I know Photoshop is incredibly expensive, and my opinion of their subscription model aside, I'm just going to show you a brief rundown on how you can use Adobe Firefly. So first I'm just going to import this example footage of me talking to the camera. I'm going to chop off the parts where I'm about to hold the camera. I'm sure you'll be doing that anyway, but there's another reason you'll find out in a moment. Once you expand the opacity tab in the effects control panel and click the pen icon, you can start the mask. The reason you will include yourself on the chair is that both will move in the video. When we're done, we're going to start moving through the timeline and start looking for when you will move outside of the mask. Then you'll modify the mask to expand outwards. We'll never move the mask or shrink it, only expand to where our arms, head or chair will move to. You might decide it's best to delete an anchor, and that's okay. In my example, it made little sense to have one there in the end. Make sure to leave a little bit of space so that later on the AI will have some visual information of which to draw the fake background. You probably won't face this problem, but make sure your hand doesn't leave the frame of the video or you'll ruin the illusion. After you have reviewed everything, you'll want to do a few things. You won't be bothering with keyframes, as you're as close to the camera as I was. Use the scale and position options to shrink yourself and keep yourself at the bottom, perhaps a little to the right. You'll see why later. You saw me moving this segment up before, so do that and create a solid black square that will make it fill the screen so that the cutout of yourself appears to be in front of the solid colour. It can be any colour. Save a snapshot and save wherever you want with the name of your choosing. If you have a Google for Adobe Firefly, you'll find this page. Click on the option at the centre top which says Generative Fill. You'll be able to upload the snapshot we saved before. By default, you'll have a brush you can paint out areas with. If you zoom in on the browser, you'll have a more detailed view. We want to make sure we're painting out all of the solid colour. We'll make sure the brush is hardened in settings too. I pan the image around a few times here with the middle mouse button, but you might want to look up the equivalent of that for your browser. I recommend getting the edges done first with a smaller brush so you can decrease the size of the brush and do the rest after. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a paint bucket tool for Adobe Firefly. The reason I do it this way with a hardened brush is so that I don't have any remaining pixels outside the mask. You can use the subtract option if you feel you may need to paint some of the mask back in. Here's the fun part. Think of a setting you want and use it as a prompt. Sometimes you'll be waiting a few seconds and get bad results, so I've skipped the bad ones. At the moment it's free, so you can always generate more. After pressing keep, you can do the same process to replace objects that don't quite make sense, but only paint in the areas that were originally a solid colour when we exported the snapshot. I've got a lamp that looks like whatever that thing is in front of my TV, so I'll keep that. If you're struggling though, or the AI isn't playing ball, try painting more of the surrounding area so the AI has more to draw upon. You'll see a download button at the top that you can save anywhere and import back into your project. Now replace it with a solid colour segment and you have the new background that looks seamless wherever you are in the timeline. The logo there in the corner is why I recommended leaving some space to the left. As a finishing touch, you can just type in noise in the effects panel here to the right and give it a very small amount in the controls. Now let's take a look how we can compare this technique to a budget green screen setup. This is using my larger green screen. Not only am I using Ultra Key here, but I'm also using 2 drop shadows as fiddling about with the Ultra Key settings made it a little bit sharp. My arm went outside the boundary of the small green screen here. I recommend against doing that unless you want to manually mask them back in, which could be very time consuming. I wouldn't recommend doing this for anything outside of your Twitch livestream with an audience of people who aren't exactly expecting anything more than your next Super Mario 64 speedrun. The reason I make this suggestion is because the green screen moves as your chair moves, so your mask can't remain static and obviously you won't be able to stand up with it. I mentioned using Photoshop before to expand upon your ideas, and this could be useful if you wanted a picture of the moon hanging up on the wall and had a specific photo in mind. I guess what I want people to take from this video is that with today's technology, you don't need to stress about not having a studio. And this is something I wish I picked up on earlier. I no longer need to stuff myself into a corner in the background just to set up a load of Wish.com grade equipment. It might take some effort in post, and it might take a little bit of luck from the generative algorithm, but it can make your life a lot easier as a content creator. I can imagine for someone who wanted to try out live streaming, whether it be for a podcast or to start your own Twitch channel, you no longer need to worry about living in your basement. What I will say though is that it's easier to do if you have a lot of room around you as you don't have much to mask. If you had a dark backdrop that you wanted to use as a background, but it only fit around you in the video, you could make it look like you had a massive backdrop, the colour and texture of the backdrop. Unfortunately, these fake backgrounds can't be animated with generative fill. You would have to do that manually, but I can't guarantee how convincing that would be unless you were a talented VFX artist. But I imagine in the future it will start becoming more of a possibility. I have heard of it technically becoming possible, but that is not very good at the moment. I did touch upon it briefly before, but the results you get won't be perfect straight off the bat. Objects will be drawn wonky, and it will take some attempts to get a good result. An example would be the spherical part of a lamp not being a perfect oval or a roof looking like it was made out of clay. Sometimes part of the image won't even make sense and you'll be like, what's even going on here? But you can't just mark out that individual part out and try again. One last thing is that if you're going to use this technique, you're going to need to use a different fake background for every single angle your camera is at. Even nudging your camera can require you to start all over again, so leave the camera on a good tripod. As of right now, however, I really enjoyed playing about with these backgrounds and would recommend having a go at trying out these scenarios yourself. In fact, AI served me with some seriously funny, surreal and nightmarish scenarios. I'm recording this voiceover like the previous one you saw, but I thought it'd be fun to show you some of these. If I didn't have my girlfriend to point this out to me, I'd have probably used something like this. First of all, that's one crooked light. It reminds me of the monster from the Backrooms. The other two things that don't make sense are the strange embedding behind my TV. I honestly don't know what's happening there. The curtains look nice, but why are they there in the first place? If you look closely, the curtains aren't hung up by anything, they just materialise from the ceiling. I was mainly having fun with this and wanted to see how Adobe Firefly could generate some guy chilling on the sofa. He looks fine, but also looks like he's crawling out of the sofa. You know when you don't necessarily find something scary, but the second you see it, you feel a very slight jump scare? This woman behind me is supposed to be a zombie, and so is this one. For this one, I tried filming downstairs in a wide space to see if I could get a better background for AI. That little space looks like it could be part of a library. I can't remember what I prompted for this, probably something to do with the camels. If I remember correctly, this was supposed to be people cheering me on. The guy next to me looks like he's giving me the finger, and this guy looks like he's got a hand for a head. AI just can't draw people, I swear. You'll see more of this later. This isn't scary as such, but the perspective here is totally wrong, and you might need to manually print out these lines to correct it. It makes it seem like the entire bedroom is on a tilt, with the cot directly behind me closest to the ceiling. If I used this and pretended it was real, I know what lies I'd use if people asked questions, but it all looks so random and cluttered. This one and the previous one I showed have paintings that just seem like random squiggles, although you could probably make out a person with the pareidolia in the blue painting. I wanted to see what it would look like to have a butler behind me, but it looks like a mysterious apparition. I also just noticed the warping background directly behind me. The lamp is cool though, even though that's wonky too. The next few are downright awful. I tried to prompt being at a wedding, instead they gave me a load of nightmare doppelgangers that are the reason you shouldn't look in the mirror during an out-of-body experience. I don't know what these are supposed to be, but I'm sure these were supposed to be fluffy animals. I was never invited to be on the set of Stranger Things, but the AI gave me a great alternative. I think I was searching clowns on purpose, but looking for scary stuff on purpose is quite difficult due to content policy. Are these faces supposed to be me? It's creepy either way. AI trying to replicate someone from a photo really gives this feeling of unease, and these eyeballs behind me remind me of Resident Evil. Using a green screen with Ultra Key is a cool way to set up your creative stuff, fast and easy. But it can burn a hole in your wallets and be a real hassle with space, lighting and what you wear. It can also be a bit annoying to set up in a tight space and take a little while. Thing is, unlike a dedicated studio, you're going to want to pack it up later, aren't you? On the flip side, AI takes a bit longer to get the perfect mask and can take some fiddling about to get just right. But when you get it just right, it's perfect when you're shooting for those reasonably uncanny vibes. So it all boils down to what you need and whatever floats your boat. But unlike ChatGPT, I'm not going to sit on the fence, so I choose AI as my favourite. Yes, it can be a pain to mask sometimes, especially when you're using a smartphone loaded with features that will automatically adjust the temperature and exposure of the image. But once you take care of that and remove clutter from you, it's a godsend. If you found this video valuable in any way, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a like, and let me know in the comments which one looks better to you, green screen or AI. Thanks for watching, bye for now.